Alright, and now that we have the backend part, or we can say the server part of our application ready, the next thing we will do is create our front-end part of our application. Open up the terminal and run the command pnpm add 10stack/react-query. Then we will have 10stack react query dev tool. Also, we will have an ESLint public query. Then we will have React hook form. Then we will have hook form resolver. Then tailwind dash merge, React hot toast. Then we have tRPC/client. Then we will have tRPC react query. These are all of the dependencies that we are going to need to build our front-end part of our application. We are adding React query version 4.18.0 from the 10 stack. It is a powerful library for managing and caching state in React application, making it easy to fetch and update data. Additionally, we are including the React Query DevTools, a developer toolset for debugging and inspecting React query in the browser. It is also going to provide us insight into queries and cache status. And then we bring in the ESLint plugin for React query. It is a linting plugin that helps enforce best practice and cache potential issues when using React query in our codebase. We also have React hook form with its resolver from the hook form. It is a library for handling forms in React application, and it will provide us a convenient way to manage form state, validation, and submission. For styling, we of course incorporated Tailwind merge package. It is a utility for merging Tailwind CSS classes dynamically. Also, we have a React hot toast. It is a convenient toast notification message. It is very simple and it is customizable toast notification library for React application. Then finally, we include tRPC client and tRPC/react query for tRPC integration with React query. It is libraries for implementing type-safe remote procedure calls in React application. That's it. And now let's update the Tailwind CSS configuration file. Over here, we will remove this background image and we are going to customize our theme to extend its default setting. We will start by adding a custom font family called Poppins. And we will configure the container to be centered with some padding and specific screen width limits. On larger screen, it is going to be 1125 pixel, and on XL and 2XL, it is also the same. So let's save this file. Alright, let's now move on to setting up React query and the tRPC client within the Next.js project. First, we will need to initialize the tRPC client. So to do that, navigate to the utils directory, and inside this we will create a file named trpc.ts. In this file, first we are going to import the app router type from the tRPC router in our project. Next, we bring in create tRPC react from tRPC/react-query. Then we create a tRPC instance for React by calling create tRPC react with our app router. Basically, this script is creating a tRPC instance for React using the tRPC react function. It uses the app router type to define the tRPC router for the application. This instance will allow us to make type-safe remote procedure calls in our React components using the defined routes in the app router. Now we want to set up a query client from React query, which will create a new instance that will manage data caching and fetching in our application. So create another file in the utils folder and name it as query-client.ts. So we start by importing the query client from 10stack react query. Then we create a new instance of the query client. This query client instance will be responsible for managing and caching data fetched by the React query. Finally, we are going to export this created query client instance to be used throughout our application. And as all the components that we have inside this app directory are now server components by default, and since we want to render the tRPC and React query providers only on the client side, we need to create a client component. In the Next.js, this is achieved by including the use client directive at the top of the file. So in the utils folder, let's create another file named trpc-provider.tsx. In this file, we start by declaring use client directive at the very top. Then we import necessary dependencies like query client provider and various utilities. We also import our tRPC instance tRPC and the query client we created earlier. Additionally, we are importing the React Query DevTools for debugging purposes. Now we define a React functional component tRPC provider that wraps our application with tRPC and React Query providers. Inside it, we determine the URL for our tRPC request based on the environment. Next, we use the useState hook to create a tRPC client with specified links and configuration. Inside it, we enable logger link for login purposes. Next, we configure the HTTP batch link so that it can handle tRPC request with the specified URL and fetch option. Then, let's utilize the getFetch function to obtain the default fetch function. And also we make sure that the credentials are included in the request for authentication. We also use super.json as the transformer for serialization and deserialization of tRPC data. Next, we wrap our application with the tRPC provider and query client provider. We also render the child components and including React Query DevTools for debugging. Now we want to invoke the procedure on server so that we don't need an HTTP request. This is going to be a server-side function. It is going to utilize createAsyncCaller function we created before. Inside the utils directory, let's create one more file which is getAuthUser.ts. In this file, let's start by importing the necessary dependencies and utilities. Then we define a function getAuthUser that fetches authenticated user information. Now we create an asynchronous tRPC caller using createAsyncCaller, and then we use the tRPC caller to fetch users information. We are also going to handle cases when the user is unauthorized. And if the user is unauthorized, we redirect them to the login page and should redirect set to true. And also we return null if there is an error or the user is unauthorized. So in summary, getAuthUser is going to use tRPC to fetch authenticated user information. It will also allow for optional redirection to the login page in case of unauthorized access. The function will also then return the user data if successfully fetched, and it is going to return null if there is an error or the user is unauthorized with the option to redirect them if needed. Perfect. Now we proceed to create reusable components that can be utilized in various sections of our application. We will start by creating a header component which will render navigation links dynamically based on the user authentication. Then we will fetch users' data on the server and render the links based on the information. So we will convert our header component into a server-side component. So to start off, let's create a component folder into our root directory, and inside this component folder, let's create a file named auth-menu.tsx. So in this file, first off, we are importing the necessary tools and utilities. We import query client from the utils query client, then we import tRPC from utils tRPC. We also import link from Next.link. We are also going to use router from next/navigation. We also need a toast from React hot toast. Then we define the auth menu component. Inside it, we grab the Next.js router using useRouter. Within this component, we will have a logout function called logoutfn that comes from the tRPC instance. If something goes wrong during the logout, we show an error toast. And if logout was successful, we do few things. On success, first we clear the React query cache. Then we show a success toast, logout successful, and then we redirect the user to the login page. Now let's return the JSX for rendering the ProPage link and logout functionalities. Inside this, we are going to use Next.js link to create a link to the ProPage, and then we have another list item which is like a button for logging out. When clicked, it will trigger the logout function. So in short, auth menu component is a small menu just for authenticated user. It provides a link to the ProPage and a button for logging out. The logout button is going to trigger the logout user mutation from tRPC. And if logout was successful, it is going to clear the React query cache and it will show us the success toast. And if any error occurs during the logout process, we display an error toast. And next, now we are going to create a header component. In this component, we will use getAuthUser function to fetch users data by invoking the getUser tRPC on server. Now we will create a header component. In this component, we will use getAuthUser function to fetch user data by invoking the getUser RPC on the server. So in the components directory, let's create another file named header.tsx. First up, we import some essentials like link for Next.js routing, auth menu for the user menu, and getAuthUser to check if someone's logged in. Then let's declare the header component. Inside it, we check if there's a logged in user using getAuthUser. Now we are going to customize our header. So in the return statement, we will have a navigation. Inside this, we have one link all-star at the top left of the page. Then we also have a link to the home page. And if there's no one logged in, we will show links for registration and login. And if there is a logged in user, we will bring the auth menu for ProPage and logout link. Lastly, we are going to export the header component. So now that we are also done with the header.tsx file, let's save this file. Now we are going to create two components, a spinner and a loading button that uses the spinner component. So let's open this, and in this component we create a new file named spinner.tsx. This is a React component which is going to bring a loading animation. First, we start by importing React and tw-merge from tailwind merge. And then we have props for the spinner. Its width, height, color and background color, set all of it to string. Then we have the spinner component. Its width set to 1.25 rem, height also set to similar. Then we also have color and background color. This spinner component itself is a simple SVG based spinner. It is going to provide a pleasant visual cue for loading state. The SVG structure starts with the role, classes, dimension and other attributes. And here we are using Tailwind CSS utility tw-merge to handle the dynamic classes. Color and background color are dynamically applied based on the props. Then we have two parts that are going to define the spinner's circular motion and shape. Finally, we are going to export this nifty spinner component. And now that we are done, let's save this file. And you don't need to copy all of these values. I'm just going to provide a repository for this project, so you don't need to worry, okay? So save the file, and next up we are going to create a loading button component. So inside this component folder, let's create another file named loading-button.tsx. This is going to be a versatile button with the built-in loading state handling. It is going to offer a very nice experience during async operations. So we start by importing React, tw-merge and spinner. Then we define the loading button prop types that allow customization of button color, text color and loading state. The loading button component itself is a React functional component that is going to render a button, and loading is set to false. The button's appearance is determined by the Tailwind CSS utility class, making it easily customizable. We use tw-merge function that is going to combine the dynamic Tailwind classes based on the prop, and the content inside the button changes based on the loading state. When it is loading, a spinner and a loading text will be displayed, and when it is not loading, the original button text will be displayed. And that's the loading button component with loading indicator. So let's save this file also. Next, we want to create forms. Our application is going to have two different forms, one for the login and second one for registration. So in the components folder, let's create another file and name it as form-input.tsx. Inside this file, we start by importing React from React. We also import useForm context from React hook form. UseForm context, it's a hook that provides access to the form context, including methods like register for form registration and validation. And we set types for every form input. The form is going to receive 3 props: label, name, and optional type for the input field, and all of these set to string. Then we set form input to render a styled input field along with the label and error message if there's any validation error. We are then destructuring form related methods and error from the form context. And then in the return statement, we are going to have JSX structure. It is going to represent a labeled input field with the dynamic styling and validation error handling. Here we are displaying the label for the input field. Then we use an input field with the tailwind CSS and we use register for form integration. And here input type is set to type. And we are also going to display any validation error if they exist. So now that we are also done with the form input element, let's save this file also. Next, we are going to create our home page, the main landing page of our application. So navigate to the app directory and inside this open this page.tsx file. So in this file here, we start off by importing header component. Then we have the home component that itself is a functional component which renders a header and the main content section. So we start by including the header component for a consistent navigation. Then we have a main content section with the dark background and minimum screen height. Inside it, we are going to have one div which is going to show you the welcome to All Star page. Alright, and then down here, as you are seeing here, we have several divs which is basically showing us the blocks, but these are not blocks, okay? These are just a specific div. But here you can include your own block component instead of just writing out a specific divs just like this. So these are all of the images that we still don't have in our application. So what we will do is we will open this public folder and I will bring all of these 4 images in it. And there we have all of the 4 images right now. So let's save this file also. That's the home component. It is going to provide a clear and styled introduction to our application. Now that we are done with our home page, what we are going to do is we are going to start the dev server by running the command pnpm dev. And then our application is started on localhost 3000. So control plus click on this. And there we have our application running on localhost 3000. Pretty amazing, isn't it? But you can see here that we didn't got image for this. So let's check what's the error. So head back to the VS Code and there we have this error which says that the requested resource isn't a valid image. This one, where is it? Okay, over here. So we have this for this over here, Heck one over here, John one over here, and then this. Okay. So I will bring in this image, okay? I didn't brought this image over here. Head back to the localhost and refresh this. And there we have our image. Now all that is done, when you click on this register, it is not going to take you to any page because we still haven't created it. So now the next step is to create a register form, right? So the user can register themselves on our application. So for it, in this app component, we are going to create another folder and name it as register. Inside this, let's create one file which is register-form.tsx. Form validation is done by React hook form and of course Zod. So we of course start by importing necessary dependencies like useForm, submit handler, form provider, and many more. We also import Zod resolver from hook form resolver Zod. Also, we import useState from React, link from Next.link, toast from React hot toast, use router from the next/navigation. We also import create user input and create user schema from user schema. Then we also import tRPC from utils directory. First, we set up some state variable using React's useState hook. Submitting keeps track of the form submission status and router will help us in navigation. Next, we define a mutation function for registering a new user. We use trpc.registeruser.useMutation to handle the registration process. This function sets submitting to true when the mutation starts and false when it is done. Form validation is done by React hook form and of course Zod, because we define validation schema with Zod, right? Now let's define a mutation function for registering a new user. We use trpc.registeruser.useMutation to handle the registration process. This sets submitting to true on mutation start and sets submitting to false when the mutation is done. And if any error occurs, we reset the password and password confirm and display the error message. But if everything was perfect, we send success message and we redirect user to the login. Then we are going to define a submission handler to call the registration mutation function. This handler is going to be triggered when the form is submitted. Now let's render the registration form. We wrap it in the form provider to provide form methods to child components. Inside the form, we render various form input components for different fields like full name, email, password and password confirmation. We also include a link to the login page for users who already have an account. Finally, we render a loading button that displays registered text and shows a spinner when the form is submitting. So if you want to look at the tailwind classes, here it is. I will just close all of this to make the screen size bigger. But you don't need to worry because I'm just going to provide a repository on my GitHub, so you can just go ahead and watch it over there also. Now I'm getting an error over here, this for form input. Let's hover and see what it is saying, that it has no default export. Okay. So in this form dash input, I think we forgot to export. Yeah. So let's export this default form input and save this, and then we have this error gone. So let's save this file also. Now we want to create a page component that will render account registration form that we created just now. So in the app directory inside this register folder, let's create another file named page.tsx. Here we start by importing the header component to include the side header. This component will be defined as an asynchronous function. We have this page divided into two main sections. The header section that will include the side header, which is imported from the header component. Second, we have the main registration section. It is like a grid-based section that vertically centers its content. This is going to contain a heading which is welcome to all star register. And then we also have heading which says that sign up to get started. Then we render the register form component that we created. So let's check in the terminal if the dev server is running, and yes, it is running on the localhost 3000. We will head back to the localhost 3000 and then we will click on this register link over here. Okay, and here we get this error which says that cannot destructure property client of use context as it is null. Okay, so now after a few moments of checking what was wrong with the code, I realized that we haven't wrapped the tRPC provider client component that we created earlier around the child component which is present in the layout component in the root directory, and because of which we are getting this error. So basically when we wrap the tRPC provider around this children prop in the layout file, we ensure that all the client component within the component tree have access to both the tRPC and React query clients. So in this layout file, we start by importing the tRPC provider functionality, and we also bring in the toaster component for displaying toast notification. And then the root layout function here receives children as a prop, right? So what we will do here is we will wrap the children prop inside the tRPC provider, and we will have a div inside which we will have our children prop. And then when we head back to the localhost 3000/register, we have our form ready over here. Amazing, isn't it? And one thing that I realized over here is that this header background color is different than this. So for that, what we are going to do is we are going to go in globals.css file, and right over here we will remove this linear background color and we will paste this which is similar to the BG grade 950 tailwind class. Alright, so let's save this file and also remove this and now save this file. And when we head back to the localhost, we have this properly. Okay. And now, as we are also done with the user registration, let's start with creating a login form now. Because when you come over here, it says that 404 because we haven't created it yet. So let's start doing that. Login form will have two input fields, email and password. So what we are going to do is, we are going to create a login folder inside this app directory. And inside this login folder, we will create one file which is named as login-form.tsx. So in this file, we start off by importing various dependencies like useForm, submit handler. We also import sort resolver. We import useState from React, link from Next.link, and then login user input and login user schema from user schema, and many other things which we have already worked on with. Then we are going to have our function which is login form. It is going to use React hooks to manage state and form submission. It is structured to provide a user-friendly login experience. So we start by defining state variables using the useState hook. The submitting state tracks the form submission status. The useRouter hook from Next.js is imported to handle navigation. And we also have the useForm hook from React hook form, which we will use it to manage form state and validation. It is configured with a sort resolver for schema-based validation. We then have the methods object obtained from the useForm that will provide the form method like reset and handle submit. We also declare the login function mutation from tRPC, which is used to trigger the login process. It's configured with callbacks for various mutation states like onSettle, onMutate, onError, and onSuccess. Then we declare the onSubmit handler function to handle form submission. It invokes the login function mutation with the form values. And the final step is to declare the JSX structure that will render the login page. So our form will be wrapped inside the form provider. And in this form, we have two form input, one for email, one for password. Then we also have a div. It is going to contain a text which says forget password. Then we have the loading button component which will be used to render the login button with the loading state. Additionally, it will provide a link for the user so that they can navigate to the registration page. And now as we are done with this, let's save this file. Now the next thing is to create page.tsx file for this login. So in the login folder, let's create another file named page.tsx. So now that we have login page created successfully, we want to render that to the client, right? So in this file, we start by importing the header and the login form components. The login form component is used to render the actual login form. Here we bring in the header into our login page because we need that navigation page on our login page also, right? The next thing is we create a section with a div inside which we have an h1 heading which says welcome back, and then you have another heading which will ask you to log in to have access. The login form component is placed within the section that is going to center its content both horizontally and vertically. And below this, we are going to have login form. So let's now save this file also and head back to the localhost 3000. And when you come back over here, and you will find this page, which is perfect, isn't it? Just we have one step remaining, that is we want to create our ProPage, which is very important. So let's now create a server component that will utilize the getAuthUser function and will retrieve the authenticated user information, and based on it, it will display the page, the ProPage. Okay, if user is authenticated, the ProPage will be shown, and if the user is not authenticated, they will get redirected to the login page. So for it, what we are going to do is, in this app directory, we are going to create one folder named ProPage. And inside this ProPage folder, we are going to create page.tsx file. So here we start by importing the header component and the getAuth user function for authentication. Additionally, we will also import the image component from next/image to display the images. The ProPage function is then marked as async because it is going to await the authentication status of the user. Inside the JSX structure of the component, first we bring up our header component because we want to show that navigation at the top, and followed by we have the section which is going to display various images and captions. Basically, this is our block section. But here, just like this div, I will have another 3 divs. But you can create a pro block component over here instead of just copy and pasting this div same times. But here is the thing that we don't want to render this divs for block. We want to create a block component. So now that is up to you. You have to create a block component, okay? And then import that block component over here. And after the header, you will show your block component over here. This getAuth user function is used to authenticate the user. And if they are authenticated, only then we will show this page, pro block page, okay? So after all is done, let's head back to the localhost 3000. And what we will do is we are just going to register a user right now. So we are going to provide full name as admin, email as admin@admin.com. Then let's copy this and paste the password and confirm password similarly like this. And then let's hit register. So we got another error which says that database server is not running on the localhost 6500. So the error was because we didn't have a PG admin running, but now we have it. And if you face the similar problem, what you will do is you will go to the localhost 5050/browser, and then here login with the credentials provided in the .env file. And let's now try registering the user. So put the password over here similar to the email, and then let's confirm password. Then let's hit register, and there we will have this cool animation for this loading button. And there we have this toast message which says registered successfully, and it then took you to the login page. So here we will provide the same password for it, and let's hit login. And there we have this login successful. Amazing, isn't it? The link is change from home register login to home ProPage logout. So let's go to the ProPage and see if this gives us. So yes, we do have our ProPage over here, but these are just the divs rendering over here. You could do more, okay? So, and with this, our video wraps over here. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, then please don't forget to like this video and also do considering subscribing. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye bye and happy coding.